Whether you ask?
Yeah.
They said that they want to
Or you can. It's already live.
Okay.
But I mean, you can.
Okay. Yeah. So what do you want me to say about Well, you do counseling and dieting too, right?
I can. I've done it before.
You've done it before?
Yeah.
Just because you're a big advocate. So that's the thing.
Yeah, you can go to the
And then when you do the wasila thing about the therapy or like the consults or whatever,
Yeah.
if you can describe what it is, like the consultation services. What did she ask you to say about that?
Sana?
Yeah.
She didn't.
She didn't say anything?
She didn't
What
say
were you going to say? Or you were not going to say it?
I was gonna say Malana is director, religious director in the workshop.
So the one thing I was going to say is that if you can add at the end maybe, like maybe at the end of the talk, right before Isha, that basically that if anyone wants to have like a more direct like discussions with him or you want to have a consultation with him, that if you go on the wasilaconnections.org website, there's a section for you to select therapy or consultation services. Just to mention. Because right now technically people don't have any resource, right, to like reach out because we don't have like the therapy thing set up with school or anything, you know?
Right. Not yet. And you're still Muslim in UC Berkeley? Yeah, we're good. We're good. Without a glove. We're still, what's it called? You're still UC Berkeley's therapist.
Yeah. But then that'll be exclusive to those students, right? So
Right.
then these guys won't be able to use that resource.
I just wanted to
Plug it?
Just share everything as possible.
Overkill.
Oh, just kidding. The mic.
Yeah, you do have an answer right now. Okay. We have a mic.
Yeah.
So you just got an answer.
You guys want to take a picture so if sisters tap you for it if you're out there?
You live out here?
Yeah, I just recently moved here. My wife is from here, so.
Okay. Moments just landed.
Oh, really?
And I think we're gonna start this right now too. Yeah. Well, each other will talk. I can talk. Are you gonna be here tonight?
Yeah, I'll be here.
Okay. Cool.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Nahmaduhu wa nusalli ala rasulihi al-Kareem. I just wanted to thank everyone for coming out for this wonderful program arranged by BMP UC San Diego at the Muslim Community Center of San Diego. This is an incredible initiative, mashallah. And we're very grateful that all of you came out and came to be a part of this wonderful program with somebody who flew right now from the Bay Area. The flight got delayed, and he arrived in San Diego Airport at 5:50 p.m. So it's a mashallah, it's a karama. We made it here on time. But alhamdulillah, we're very grateful to have him. Just a quick introduction. Shaykh Jabir Tarin is a registered associate marriage and family therapist. In his mental wellness work with Wasila Connections, Shaykh Jabir has experience providing individual, premarital and marital counseling to Muslim individuals and couples. Through the Muslim Mental Health Initiative program as well, he also serves as a therapist and spiritual and religious leader, providing weekly counseling, consultations, and ummah talks to students at the University of California, Berkeley. Shaykh Jabir's professional interests include providing mental well-being and spiritual direction to the city of Fremont, integrating Islamic spirituality with mental wellness, and teaching Islamic theology to young adults and college students. Shaykh Jabir is also a teacher at Madrasa Darul Ulum al-Ashrafiyya, teaching the Islamic sciences. So mashallah, I always joke around with Shaykh Jabir that, they say in English, the jack of all trades, master of none. And I always joke around and say he's jack of all trades, master of all trades. Mashallah, Shaykh Jabir is a religious director at an organization called Wasila Connections, providing for the Muslim community therapy and mental health well-being and breaking stigmas in this mental health field that we continuously have in our culture and in our communities. MashaAllah, he's also of the first individuals to graduate from Darul Ulum al-Ashrafiyya, an Islamic university in Northern California, the first batch who graduated a few months ago. He's also, mashallah, a therapist alongside that. So he's combining the best of both worlds. Sometimes we complain that therapists sometimes give advice that is contrary to our religion. But alhamdulillah, to have therapists who handle both the Islamic sciences alongside therapy is a great initiative. MashaAllah, we're very grateful that everyone was able to make it out. And we have with us our two presidents of the organization that brought Shaykh Jabir to San Diego and brought Shaykh Jabir to our masjid, Sister Uwaisa Ali and Sister Aisha Aziz. Inshallah, they will talk a little bit about their initiative and their program that they're involved in, mashallah.
Assalamu alaikum everyone. Jazakallah khairan for coming out tonight. This really means a lot to us. This is our first collaboration event with MCC. Inshallah, more to come. We are so honored to have Shaykh Jabir here with us. So again, Jazakallah khairan to coming out. We wanted to introduce a little bit about BMP, or the Beautiful Mind Project, and what it does at UCSD. Do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, the Beautiful Mind Project at UCSD was started because we felt that there was an unmet need for mental health resources for Muslims at UC San Diego and the greater San Diego community. We're a part of a larger branch of the Beautiful Mind Project. There's one at UC Berkeley and one at UCLA. And we work to provide resources for Muslim students and the general Muslim community so that they're better equipped to handle their mental health. And part of that is putting on this event with Shaykh Jabir today. And so we're really glad that you guys were all able to come out. At the end of Shaykh Jabir's talk, there will be a question and answer session, which is anonymous. And the platform that we'll be using is called mentimeter.com. And the code that you guys can put to send in your questions is 882-14478. And I'll repeat it afterwards as well if you guys want to send in questions. Thank you.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله النبي الكريم اللهم لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم اللهم لا فهم لنا إلا ما فهمتنا إنك أنت الجواد الكريم وقل ربي زدني علما. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. To everyone who came out tonight, and for all of you who are watching online and streaming, I'm very thankful and very grateful to all of you for facilitating this event here at this beautiful masjid, mashallah, in beautiful San Diego. Mashallah, Hafiz Amin said a lot of really wonderful things, a lot of colorful things, a lot of extra things, I think, also. I'm just a member of my community, alhamdulillah, and I enjoy being a part of my community just like all of you, showing up to the masjid, being part of their local community projects, and just, continuing that with that sort of goal in mind. That's also been the work that I've done as well. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept all of your efforts and all the work that you all have done to facilitate this, and the great work that you continue to do. Our topic tonight is on gender relations in Islam, and particularly gender relations, whether it's on a college campus, whether it's, in any actual place, whether it's in the metaverse, whether it's online, whether it's in person, whether it's in school, whether it's in the masjid. The topic is about gender relations. So the thing is that most of the work that I do when it comes to working with, I suppose, college students and general populations is largely at a university setting. So that you can say a great deal of the work that I do is at the university level. And this topic, as you can imagine, is an incredibly contentious issue. It's something that everyone is constantly tiptoeing around, whether tiptoeing in the right direction or tiptoeing in the wrong direction. Folks are tiptoeing, okay? And the problem is that we don't actually have a ton of clarity on how to actually address this, because it can get overwhelming, not knowing exactly what's too far or how much is too much, or, is that message okay to send? Is it a little too risky? Is it a little not too risky? Should I be talking to this person? Well, what if I want to get married one day? Or, oh, no, we're just friends. There's nothing serious about it. So who's going to be the judge of that? Who's going to know when too much is too much, or, too little is too little? So gender relations is such an important topic for us as Muslims. That's the first point, first element here, as Muslims, for us to understand. How we view the world, whatever it may be. We have to view the world because we identify as Muslims. This is who we are, this is our identity. This is what we believe in. Our iman and our aqidah is in our faith and Islam. We have to view the world from those lens. So as I begin this, I just want everyone to know that this is how we start the foundations of our discussion. When a person wants to go to school for a particular degree or for a particular direction in their education, they take all the necessary prerequisite classes, all the necessary classes in order to build up until they can get to that point where now they're majoring in, let's just say, chemical engineering, or to get to grad school or med school to become a doctor. You take all the necessary steps, but you start by addressing the foundational core classes that you need to address first. And then you build off of that, and then you go in whatever direction you end up going in. So one thing in particular that's important for us to understand is that when we talk about gender relations, which angle are we going to take this from? Okay? Which angle are we going to start this conversation from? Are we going to take it from a pop culture direction? What does all the celebrities talk about it? What my favorite basketball player or football player, how they talk about gender relations? Oh, Mike Tyson says that I don't talk to women for 60 days before a fight because then, it's going to distract me. So that's the direction I want to go in life. Or some rapper tells you something. It's like, where do we get the goals or the direction for the things that we do in our lives? So like I said, as Muslims, we should be getting it from our faith, the direction, the foundations, and that base. And that's where we want to start. We want to start this discussion from that basis so that everything we build from here goes straight up. And first and foremost, we have to understand that our deen, mashallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not left anything out. In every element of our lives, whatever category, whatever issues, whatever discussions, feelings, emotions, relationships, anything you can think of, Islam has some direction, some way of handling that. We can never feel as Muslims that, Islam doesn't have an answer to this. I can't address this. This can't be addressed through Islam or through our faith. Even though we might not know how, but it's not like Islam has left anything. So with that being said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran, specifically in Surah Al-Isra, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا تَقْرَبُوا الزِّنَا إِنَّهُ كَانَ فَاحِشَةً وَسَاءَ السَّبِيلًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, do not go near committing zina. Allah doesn't say, don't commit zina. Don't commit fornication. Don't go sleeping around. Allah says, don't go near fornication. لا تقربوا الزنا. Why? Because إنه كان فاحشة وساء سبيلا. Because the act of fornication, this act of zina, is just a wretched thing. It's a foul thing. And the lifestyle that it's going to develop for you, if you pick up that, is a terrible lifestyle. And the thing is, the reality is that, people joke about this, and, we're all adults here, but we're all young adults here and adults here, and we understand that a lot of what we see on social media, on TikTok, on all these various things on Instagram, you see a specific lifestyle that's being portrayed to everybody. A very specific lifestyle. Very loosey-goosey kind of lifestyle. I'm going to dress how I want to dress. I want to act how I want to act. I want to, be with whoever I want to be with. I want to sleep around with whoever I want to sleep around with. And please forgive me because some of these topics are kind of sensitive, okay? And I understand we're in the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but this is, like I said, is a contentious issue, right? This is a topic on gender relations. I mean, it's just pretty much what you're going to get here. Okay? So the thing is that we see on social media a very specific lifestyle that's kind of being shown again and again and again and again. And you start to notice everyone starts to kind of just go down that path eventually. But look, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, we've been knowing about this. Don't go near zina. Why? Because zina itself, fornication, adultery, sleeping around, is just a terrible thing to do in and of itself, but the lifestyle that creates for you is also a bad lifestyle. It's not going to lead you down any direction where you'll be happy with it. But the other interesting thing to point out is Allah says, وَلَا تَقْرَبُوا الزِّنَا. Don't go near committing zina. So what does that mean? It's not saying don't go and commit that exact action. Of course, committing zina is bad, but Allah is telling us something even more interesting here. He's saying, avoid those things that will take a person and bring you closer to committing zina. So if you know that your vice, your weakness is your phone, is your social media, that this is the thing that's constantly getting you caught up with the opposite gender, constantly getting you caught up on websites you shouldn't be on, constantly looking at content you probably shouldn't be engaging in, then maybe for you, this ayah is talking about your phone. وَلَا تَقْرَبُوا الزِّنَا. And abandon those things which are leading you to get closer to committing adultery or fornication. So this is just one angle of it. Inshallah, we're going to be addressing a ton of different issues here. Okay? But that's just one angle. In a very beautiful hadith, the Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam mentions, لا يخلون رجل بامرأة إلا ومعها ذو محرم. That a man should not be totally alone with another woman except that they have a mahram with them. A mahram is a person who is a blood relative, someone you cannot marry. Okay? So, like if you had a sister, as a man, if you had a sister, she's your mahram. You cannot marry her. So if you were to talk to another person, the opposite gender, and the conversation's perhaps very, involved or engaging, then don't do so except that your sister is there, your mother is there, your aunt is there, your grandmother is there. Some mahram should be there. Why would the Prophet ﷺ mention this if it wasn't a big deal? And another similar hadith, the Prophet ﷺ says, أَلَا لَا يَخْلُوَنَّ رَجُلٌ بِامْرَأَةٍ إِلَّا كَانَ ثَالِثُهُمَا الشَّيْطَانِ. From a totally different angle, that the Prophet ﷺ gets our attention and goes, أَلَا لَا يَخْلُوَنَّ رَجُلٌ. That listen up, no man should be totally alone with another woman except that third person who will be there is shaitan himself to deceive you. And there's a very beautiful hadith that sort of corroborates this idea that إِنَّ الشَّيْطَانَ يَجْرِي فِي الْإِنسَانِ كَمَجْرِ الدَّمِ أو كما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام. That shaitan flows through mankind, flows through you, just like your blood flows through your veins. How close is that? Your blood flowing through your veins, this is your life source. It's literally flowing through you, your blood. But shaitan flows through you just like your blood flows through you. So, now going back to this hadith, what is the Prophet ﷺ teaching us here? That none of you, no man and woman, should be totally alone. Just the two of you. Why? Because the third person's shaitan. And what is that trying to say? This is not like a Halloween reference, like it's spooky or something. Oh, shaitan's going to get you. He's going to be there. No, the point is that the third person's shaitan because he's going to influence you. That the thing that shaitan... Why does it mention that shaitan's the third person? You can't see shaitan. Just if I'm standing with a woman alone somewhere, all of a sudden shaitan's not going to magically appear like a genie or something. You know, he's just going to pop up, here I am. No, the whole point is that he's going to influence now your thoughts, your emotions. You're alone with this woman or she's alone with you and now these thoughts are roaming through your head. What sort of things? And we'll address that as well. But the idea is that there's a reason why all these things are being mentioned. It's not to make your lives difficult. Let's just make it plain and simple. Our parents, maybe our parents, our family members, or the imam, or the whatever, your whole life you've heard this, Oh, don't talk to girls, don't talk to boys, don't be alone. There's a reason, As young adults, we understand this now. As adults, we understand this now. Another person might make this objection that, everything is hypersexualized. Every time these guys with beards speak on the minbar, everything has to do with sexual relations and interactions with the opposite gender, and it's always the same thing. Why? Why has it always got to be that way? But the reality is, respected brothers and sisters and elders, the thing is, this is not a Muslim problem. It's just not. This is a pandemic. This is a worldwide issue that people just don't know how to be with the opposite gender. People just don't know how to act with them. And so what happens as a result is if you work at any corporate job, you have to take a sexual harassment training every 3 to 6 months, take a test, pass a test to show that you're not going to be a weirdo. You have to take a test in America in the corporate world to prove that you're not a weirdo. But when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells you don't be weirdos, and there's a whole, system in place for that, we're like, oh, come on, these guys don't know how to have fun, So, anyways, we're going to get to that as well. So then, as we continue on, remember what I'm doing. Right now, I'm going to bring all of these foundational points in our tradition and our faith in Islam that show the emphasis on why it's extremely important and the basis for where we get this idea or what we're going to talk about for our the rules or regulations around gender relations. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran, again in Surah An-Nur, but a different way. Allah says, قُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ يَغُضُّوا مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِمْ وَيَحْفَظُوا فُرُوجَهُمْ ذَلِكَ أَزْكَى لَهُمْ إِنَّ اللَّهَ خَبِيرٌ بِمَا يَصْنَعُونَ. Allah addresses men specifically. And he says, tell the believing men that they should guard their eyes. They should guard their eyes, that they should not be looking at just every woman that passes by. That they should not be checking everybody out all the time and just looking at everybody and just looking at everything that, every moving motion they're just looking at. And then Allah says, and tell the believing men to guard their chastity. To guard your chastity. That you should not go around and sleeping around just like that. Oh, why do I have to? Why can't I go and just be with whoever I want to be with? Who says I can't do that? Right here. وَيَحْفَظْنَ فُرُوجَهُنَّ. That they should guard their chastities. Why? ذَلِكَ أَزْكَى لَهُمْ. Because that's most best for you. There's no benefit in this for anybody other than you. No one benefits from you protecting yourself, your body, your eyes, other than you. No one else benefits. This is a benefit for you. But the interesting thing is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't stop here alone by just telling the men to guard yourself. Because immediately afterwards, Allah addresses the women directly as well. وَقُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنَاتِ. يغضضن من أبصارهن ويحفظن فروجهن ولا يبدين زينتهن إلا ما ظهر منها. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala directly addresses the women and tells the believing women that they should also guard their eyes. You should also not be looking around, checking everybody out. It's not a one-way street, there's a two-way street here. Both the men and the women. Then they should also protect their chastity. This is another message addressed to the women. And then Allah adds, وَلَا يُبْدِينَ زِينَتَهُنَّ, and that they should not expose their beautification except that which is already exposed of them, like their hands or their faces. But the rest of them, the rest of their body, they should not expose. Now this is a message that's directed to both men and women. Now again, we're laying the foundations for this topic on these gender relations. Okay? These are the concepts Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to know, that this is how we base and this is how we judge the decisions and the way that we live our lives amongst each other, at work, at home, in the masjid, outside of the masjid. If you see each other at the grocery store, like just, consider these things. It's a better way, a pure way, a safer way to live one's life. And there's such an interesting story I also wanted to make mention of, because there's this concept, ittaqu mawadi' at-tuham. Ittaqu mawadi' at-tuham. The Prophet ﷺ says that you should be considerate and watchful of putting yourself in a position to be blamed for anything. Because it's very easy. This is the really corny thing everybody says all the time. Every single time that people get involved in something that maybe they shouldn't be involved in, they say, only Allah can judge me. Everyone becomes Tupac, Everyone becomes Tupac. Only God can judge me. Okay, that's really cool. But here's the thing. That's only half of the statement. Okay? Because the other half is this hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. But don't put yourself in that position to be blamed in the first place. Yes, we should not be judging one another anyways. It's not my right to judge you why you look a certain way, or why you talk a certain way, or why you do what you do. But let me paint a picture for you. While, yes, I shouldn't be judging you, but if you saw the imam of the masjid outside of 7-Eleven at 2 o'clock in the morning with a brown paper bag sitting in front of the 7-Eleven on the ground, you might be thinking, hey, Imam Sahib, what's going on, man? That's kind of sketchy a little bit. That's a little weird. You're standing outside of a 7-Eleven with a brown paper bag in your hand at 2 o'clock in the morning. Now, maybe he had a headache and he just had a cup of water in there, and the bottle of water was so cold that he needed a brown paper bag to cover it. That'd give him all the benefit of the doubt. But here's the thing. At the end of the day, you have to also not judge him, that I don't think the imam is getting drunk right now. But at the same time, the imam should also be considerate that, hey, you know what? This probably doesn't look very good. I probably shouldn't be in this position in the first place. I shouldn't be standing outside, or this is beautiful San Diego with beaches and miles and hundreds of miles of beaches everywhere. I probably, if someone were to see me, two young adults, college students, with 10 women, young Muslim college women, at a bonfire at the beach at 2 o'clock in the morning, maybe that looks a little weird. I don't know. Maybe I should think about that before I do that, and think about how that might look. It doesn't look very good now, does it? But somebody else can easily say, oh no, don't judge. How do you know what we did? We didn't do anything. That's true, I won't judge. But at the same time, right, that looks very suspicious to me, that at 2 o'clock in the morning, there's like 15 young college students all alone on some beach somewhere having a bonfire, okay? That's a little suspect, okay? So that's, this is really important to understand. One time the Prophet ﷺ was speaking to his wives late at night. And two young Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anhum were walking, and they saw him and they turned away and they walked away. So they turned around and they walked away, not to disturb him. So the Prophet ﷺ called them back. He says, no, come here. He said, this is my wife. This is not just anybody. This is my wife, and I'm talking to my wife. So they said, no, O Messenger of Allah, we would have never thought that, you were speaking to someone else, or you were speaking to, some strange woman at this hour. But he says, no, but that doubt in your heart. I don't want there to be any doubt in your heart. This is my wife. So there's a basis for all of this. This is not just about being hardcore or something about, ruining our lives, or we'll never be able to meet each other, or we'll never be able to get married then. If we can't do this, then what can we do? So inshallah, we're going to jump into it, and we're going to kind of get into some of these categories. I have about 6 or 7 points that inshallah we're going to address, 6 or 7 different categories. I'll wrap it up by 7:50 so that we can then do a Q&A session, okay? So just to reiterate before I sort of jump right in, if anybody wants to send in their anonymous questions, you can go on your phones on this website, Menti, MENTI.com. And when you get on there, you can enter this code, okay, 888821, so 2 8s, 21 4478. And then here on this lovely screen here, your anonymous question will pop up. And then I'll, inshallah, answer it. But at 7:50, okay? But you can probably send it all in now. I'm sure, nothing's going to happen. All right, so just to begin, I wanted to kind of start off, of course, with these ayat and the ahadith, just to lay our foundations as Muslims, kind of where's the basis for all this? Where's this coming from? We're not just sort of speaking out of thin air. We're not kind of like, making this stuff up. But, there's an organization called the Family Youth Institute, FYI. Very popular organization. They do excellent work. They have a ton of awesome infographics and studies and toolkits on their website for people to utilize for, sort of the whatever concerns they may have for abuse, mental health check, all these various things. It's a really great resource on their website. So I just wanted to mention, and I'm sure we've all seen this infographic at one point or another, but there was a 2015 study that was done on college students, okay, young adults. And the degree or the percentage of college Muslim students that engaged in premarital relations, illicit sexual relations outside of marriage while in college, okay? 48% of women, Muslim women in college, had committed zina in college at least once. 48% of Muslim college students. And nearly 60% of men had also done so. So clearly you can see, this is more than 50%. This is about 50% plus of both men and women, Muslim students in college, have committed zina, premarital sexual relations. And it's of course concerning, because we're talking about gender relations. And if as Muslims we do believe that those things are not permissible until marriage, then this is a concerning statistic for all of us. Maybe we don't know how to have our segregation. We don't know how to have separation, or we don't know how to communicate with the opposite gender. Not always separation, because it's inevitable that we're going to interact, but how to interact, okay? The second point I want to address is that there's oftentimes this idea that certain people are free from having wrong thoughts or illicit thoughts. Certain people are too clean. Certain people don't think like that. They're just my friend. I don't see them that way. I could never be, intimate with one person or this person. I grew up with them. They're like my sister. They're like my brother. So a couple of things to mention about that as well, because we hear that floating around all the time. Okay? Now here's the thing. There was a study that was done a few years ago as well. I didn't have it quoted, unfortunately. But there was a study that asked a decent number of people if they believed that men and women could be just friends. And the resounding response, an answer to that was, no, there is no way men and women can be just friends. Now, this was not a study done by Muslim. This was not a study done by any Muslim organization, actually. This was entirely a secular organization that was going around just interviewing people, and they are doing this study. In every element in which there was no segregation, there was an influence of the opposite gender on the effect of whatever work they were doing. Whether it was the workplace, whether it was during an exam, whether it was in the classroom, whether it was in sports. The fact that the opposite gender was there influenced the behavior or the response to that behavior to some degree. It influences you. Just by the fact that they are there. The fact that there's men here or the fact that there is women there will influence your response, influence the way you see yourself, perceive yourself, the amount of engagement you want to have. All of those things become impacted as a result. Okay? So that's just one statistic, one additional sort of point to consider. The other point to consider is oftentimes we get this idea that, you know what, I know this person, or, you know, I grew up with this person, this man or this woman, and, you know, nothing could ever happen between us, etc. But what's really important to also keep in mind is if you don't think that way about that person, let's just say, for the sake of argument, you believe 100% and you're sincere about it. 100% you have 0%, sexually explicit thoughts about the opposite gender, that person who you're alone with right now. The thing is, the reality is, there's no way for you to guarantee that they are not thinking that way about you. And I think this is like the big takeaway. Because you cannot guarantee that they are also thinking the same thing, this is why it's also just as concerning to not be alone with that person. They might view you as the type of person who would never do anything like that. But you're a huge shaitan maybe or something, and in your head you're thinking, no, if right now I was able to propose to her, I would totally do so. And she's probably thinking, oh no, he's my friend, I know him so well, we grew up together, etc., etc. Because you can't guarantee that. You don't know what the other person's thinking. So we always have to be considerate. We always have to just be extra careful, extra thoughtful when it comes to the way that we interact with the opposite gender. Okay? So now we're going to actually go into those 7 categories that I talked about, the healthy ways of navigating our gender relations, okay? Now I just want to make this clear, this disclaimer. These are my sort of points that I put together in my sort of 6 years of clinical practice in mental health and the whatever amount of years that I've worked in the sort of religious community as well. This is a kind of a culmination or a combination of all of my experiences here that seem to be sort of like the top concerning areas for us to pay attention to and how we should address them, okay? And I'm sure if we all sat here and brainstormed for an hour or so, we could probably come up with dozens of other things that we should pay attention to, right? I'm sure we can do that. But for the purposes of tonight's discussion and talk, we'll address these issues, okay? Inshallah. So point number one, and probably the most obvious point, don't be alone with the opposite gender one-for-one, meaning entirely alone. Okay? And I want to clarify this. What does this mean, entirely alone? Now, let's say you have some work you need to do at the office, at some school project or something, and you have to, touch base with another person, opposite gender, and you have to be alone with them. Now, being alone with them in a setting like this where there's 150 people or 100 people with you or around you is slightly different. But being private, completely alone, is like being in the car alone with someone of the opposite gender where no one's going to see you. Or being in such a room where there's no windows, the door's not open, no one can see what's happening, and no one could hear you. That is what you would define as entirely private or totally private. Okay? So being entirely alone with someone in that regard, try to avoid that at as much as you possibly can. Because that's like right there being thrown into the lion's den. So that's point number one altogether. Avoid being entirely alone with the opposite gender as best as you can. And of course, the way I just described is that alone in such a way that no one could pass, anyone who passes by or, no one's going to see inside of that room or no one could hear anybody in that room, it becomes concerning. So actually, one of the practices that we used to incorporate when, pre-COVID, when we were still seeing clients in person, because someone could ask, don't you see clients of the opposite gender in therapy? And then if you did that, wouldn't it be in a private room to protect the confidentiality of the individual who is there, the privacy of that person? This is a very good objection, right? This is a very valid point. So, first of all, to cut this down as much as possible, we actually were not allowed as male clinicians to see female clients as a general rule. We were not allowed to do so because there was other female clinicians there, so they can see the female clients. However, if that time came where, for example, there was not enough available female, clinicians, therapists, then yes, there was a policy for this, that our rooms all had blinds and windows, so we would open the blinds. Or the door would be open, a crack, just, an inch or 2 inch, the door would be open. So that if anybody were to stand right by that door, they could hear the style of conversation. Now, you might say, well, that's a kind of a breach of their privacy, etc. A little bit, maybe, but we would ask everyone ahead of time, would you be okay with this? We just want to make sure that nothing happens, that the session itself is entirely professional, that nothing goes out of line, the discussion doesn't go out of line. So we had all of these policies in a legitimate clinical office to ensure that this doesn't happen. Now think about that. We literally had to do that. So to say that it's impractical or impossible, it's kind of a bit of a stretch, right? Oh, there's no way I can avoid that. I don't think so. I think that maybe some part of us don't want to avoid that, okay? So that's point number 1. Point number 2, now when you are speaking to the opposite gender, right, you don't need to always make chit-chat and small talk and make the other person laugh and make your voice so incredibly soft and luring, because all of these things are intentional. And I really hope that this is not misconstrued in a weird, sexist, overly hypersexualized way, because truly this is not my objective. But I think if we're all being really honest with ourselves, a lot of this is intentional. Okay? A lot of this is intentional. We do it, and we know we do it, and, we do so to kind of relay this, to show interest, or to show that you've got game, that you can talk to the other person, or you're interested in that other person. So what we'll do is we'll soften our voices, our eyes will flutter a little bit extra too much, we'll speak when we're speaking to the opposite gender, or, we'll make a ton of ridiculous jokes that have no meaning, they're not funny, and they're completely useless, corny, cringeworthy comments, just for the sake of what? Just to make small talk. Okay? So don't do that. You don't need to do that. When you're speaking to the opposite gender, you can be cordial, you can be normal, you can have a conversation, you can ask how a person's doing. But at the same time, right, you can be direct and get your message across, relay the information that you want to relay without needing to make extra discussion and extra conversation. Because as human beings, we're social beings. We interact with one another. This is part of our khilqah. This is who we are. But you can do so in a much more sort of guarded way, at least with the opposite gender. Okay? And this will at least be some form of a deterrent for a person who is much more inclined to use those means to kind of infiltrate and to engage with the opposite gender in a way that may not be appropriate. This will be a means for you to cut that out of your system, out of your day, out of your life. I had these consultation services that I offer to the students at UC Berkeley, where, they call me and they make these anonymous sessions, and then we speak for half an hour to an hour about anything that's going on in their lives. And it's like a private consultation. You get a chance to speak to someone, get what's off on your head, get it off your mind, and things like that. There was a student who told me on Monday. Today is Monday. No, today's Tuesday. No, today's Monday. Last Monday. So last Monday, a student called me and he says, this thing that you mentioned about the small talk, he starts laughing on the phone. He goes, I kind of prided myself in being a master of small talk with the opposite gender. I was like, okay, and? He goes, well, I realized that all of my issues start there, actually. Because that's what I do. It's a natural response. Because I feel like, you can't look bad. You can't look stupid. You can't look like you can't talk to women. You don't want to feel awkward. So my immediate approach to talking with the opposite gender was always with this small talk. I had perfected it. I knew how to become someone's friend. I knew how to become really funny with them, really flirtatious with them. I had perfected this whole thing. And he said that, because I gave this same presentation at UC Berkeley, just a few weeks back. And then he messaged me about it. So then when he said that, he said, I realized that I was secretly lying to myself by saying, oh, well, I didn't do anything. I'm just talking. I'm just being myself. I'm being really, just chill about it, just really being nice. But that's the thing. He said, if I'm being real about it, because he knew, and we all sort of know, that we do certain things or we express ourselves in certain ways that can give a different meaning. Okay? So that was point number 2. That when you do have to communicate with the opposite gender, do so in a way that is cordial, that is kind, that's considerate, but being direct about it. You don't need to make side comments. You don't need to make small talk. Okay? That's point number 2. So point number 3, one of the scholars, one of the mashayikh, they mention that when speaking directly to the opposite gender, do so by making direct eye contact. Now this is interesting because, largely in a lot of Muslim, being raised in culturally Muslim environments, you realize that like maybe I just said, قُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ يَغُضُّ مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِمْ, that tell the believing men and the believing women to lower their gazes. That's right, yes. But one of the mashayikh said that when you are speaking to the opposite gender, speak in such a way that you make direct eye contact. Why? Because if you have to maintain eye contact, then you will avoid breaking eye contact to look anywhere else, to not allow your eyes to float. So therefore, you maintain eye contact to get your message across, because it would be awkward and very obvious if you broke that eye contact just to allow your eyes to float around, right? So he says one good practice to keep yourself in line is to maintain eye contact with the person that you're speaking to. So that way, when communicating with them, you are directly speaking about that thing that is concerning you, that thing which is the main subject, the main topic. And then that way the conversation can't go again to the left or to the right. Okay? These are all exercises, these are all practices, these are all things that we can slowly, one by one, begin to incorporate into our own lives. Maybe we will leave this talk tonight not having remembered all 7 of these points. Maybe only one thing was relevant to you. Maybe only one thing you remembered the most. Maybe I made a bad joke and you remember that. And then you were like, okay, that's the thing that I'm really bad at. I make a lot of small talk and I think I'm really cool, but I guess really maybe I'm not so cool when I do it, so I'm going to stop doing that. Then you're going to go home, and every day after that you have the opportunity to make small talk, you catch yourself. And you're like, that one stranger who came from the Bay Area said, don't make small talk because it's going to be the gateway to your vice, and the issues that you have. So then you take that and you run with it. And you're like, what? I'm not going to do that no more. And that's good, because all of this is going to be a gradual development. This is all going to be gradual, gradually working on it to finally get to a point to where you have a better balance of how to manage these gender relations. Point number 4 is the social media. Okay? How to deal with the opposite gender via social media. And I kind of labeled this the dilemma of the DM. Okay? And the thing is, this is another major issue, is our communications when it comes to online platforms, social media, apps, Discord, TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat, just everything and all of that, using these various apps to communicate with the opposite gender. I mean, there's so much that can be said here, but a couple of things that are, I would say, like the core issues is that first and foremost, for those of us who are active on a lot of these apps, you know very well how you can delete your messages, have it vanish. Even WhatsApp now has timed videos and timed images that'll just vanish after you send it. So you can imagine that, if a person's mind goes in that direction, that they want to do certain things that may be inappropriate or sketchy or whatever, they can easily do so and get away with it. But so here's the thing. If this is a concern of yours, then you will also very much realize that you have to be just as careful with the social media platforms as you would in person. And I think we can confidently say you have to be more cautious of social media than you have to do with in person. Because people are in person less courageous as they are online. They're less courageous in person as they are on texting or social media, etc. Right? There was this isn't a study or anything, but there was anecdotal evidence to suggest that when you text message someone in the daytime, let's say like from morning till around Dhuhr time, 2 o'clock, your texting style is very different. What you'll say, what you'll text, how much courage you'll have to communicate something will be very different than if you were to text that same person later in the evening, at night, at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, midnight, 2 o'clock. Your texting style will be very different. Why? Because in the morning, you're a lot more alert. You're a lot more focused. You're worried about a few other things. You have job, you have work, you have family, you have food, you have lunch, all these things. So your mind's not really sort of just like, all relaxed out. But in the evening, what happens is that we are relaxed out. We get too comfortable. So then we send that extra risky message. We'll say that one extra super corny line, add that extra additional emoji at the end of it, send that picture that maybe we didn't want to send. Maybe we thought all day about sending that image, that selfie, and we were like, no, I can't. But then you come home, you crash, you're tired, you just open up your phone, and that's the first thing that's on there. You're like, forget it, send it anyways. Then you get, because you got comfortable. That's so interesting, right? So the dilemma of the DM is this idea that we get too comfortable online, on social media, on all these various platforms. So what we do is we kind of lose track of our own selves too. And when we lose track of our own selves, what ends up happening is that, like I said, we engage in a lot of behavior that would otherwise be totally not like you. The communication, the conversations, what types of conversations come up at 2 o'clock in the morning you would never imagine you would talk about at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And then all of a sudden you find yourself talking about the craziest things on planet Earth at 2 o'clock in the morning with this person who you kind of connected with or something. We live in an age where with the click of a button, you can have illicit sexual relations with the click of a button. That's insane. And if a person were to think that it's not that big of a deal, you're just old. You don't know how to use these things. You don't know how to control yourself. You're just, making a big deal out of nothing. Look, the reality is I think everybody knows. It has nothing to do with age or anything. I think everybody knows that it's just easily accessible. And when you get to a certain stage in your life, Allah protect us, but if a person were to get to a certain stage in their life, a certain mentality in their life, you have access to that. That's all that it comes down to. So what's holding you back from engaging in that? That's kind of what we're talking about here. That we have to be considerate. We have to think about that. That this can lead me to that wrong direction. So, in relation to this, that first ayah of the Quran that I read, وَلَا تَقْرَبُوا الزِّنَا, don't go near zina, we can maybe bring that verse to mind when this is happening, or when we're getting close, or when things like that, start manifesting. I'm getting really comfortable with another person. I'm really beginning to like them. So I'll look up their profile on Facebook and I can't find them. So then on Instagram, so then on Snapchat, so then on whatever. Are you on the Discord chats? If not, then okay, then on, I don't know, what are other? LinkedIn. LinkedIn, that's supposed to be a professional networking site, and we've bastardized that as well and made that another, means to like weasel our way in. All of these things. And then some people will message you professionally from LinkedIn to make it seem like it's more professional. Oh, I'm just interested in the work that you're doing. No, you're not. You're not. Cut it out. Don't do that. But we'll utilize all of these resources. So it's extremely important to be considerate. So, now, mind you, I'm very aware of the fact that up until this point, I haven't said anything about marriage purposes. Okay? I'm very aware of that. That's the last thing I'm going to talk about. Everything else is everything outside of marriage purposes. Okay? I did this on purpose. Because in the back of your minds, you might be thinking, well, maybe I could do that if I'm interested in that person for marriage. Maybe I could do this, or maybe I could do that. No. All of this has nothing to do with marriage. This is in general. We're going to talk about when the time for marriage comes up and how we can address that, okay? Separately. But when it comes to this, text messages, this is purely just platonic, which is such an odd word. But this idea that we're just friends and so therefore we're just talking. Look, text messages will definitely lead, from one thing to another. And if you absolutely must speak to the opposite gender in direct message, then create a group chat. You're already in 10,000 group chats. Just make one more so it's, you're safe. Turn off the notifications forever until Qiyamah. On WhatsApp, You can turn off notifications for like 8 hours, 10 days, I think, and then like one says unlimited or eternity or 1 year or something. I wish there was eternity because I would click that on every group chat I'm in. But like, you can do that. Create a group chat, add a few people in there so there's an extra eye on there. There's extra attention. I'll even add one interesting story. Maybe my friend is listening right now, and if he is, forgive me. But it's a good story. I'm not going to mention details anyways. When my friend was getting married, very, very close dear friend of mine was getting married, and he was talking to the person, or he wanted to start talking to the person that he was interested in, he didn't want to engage with that person in a private message, like directly messaging them. He didn't want to do that. So he had his sister join in the group chat between the woman he was interested in marrying and himself. So he added his sister. Now here's the thing. It's not like she's going to sit there at dinner and just read all of their, conversations about like what are your interests and what would you like to do and, what's your goals in life. But the idea is that there's a third person watching so that the conversation can't go sideways. And having that extra set of eyes there will create this type of fear that, I have to be very careful because I don't know what they're going to say. I don't know what they're going to do. If I were to say something inappropriate, it would be very wrong. They can see it, they might tell my parents, they might tell, whoever, anybody. And it's not appropriate. The other harms of the dilemma with social media, with the direct message, is you don't know, no matter how much you think you like that person or know that person or you think it's, no issues at all, we're just friends, you don't know what that person can do with your text messages, with your, with screenshots, how they can doctor it, how they can edit it. It's always better to just be careful and safe. They'll take something out of context and make it seem as if you said something you never said. And then what happens? Then it tarnishes your reputation, your name, your honor, and everything that comes with it. Okay? So that's sort of like the big dilemma with the DMs. Okay? And it's not really harmless. You know what's a harmless? Actually, I'll even add this. You know what's not even a harmless DM? Facebook Marketplace. You want to sell your old, microwave, and someone will message you. Look at something, and now I know this is sounding really excessive, but I'm just trying to paint a picture here. Even the idea that on Facebook Marketplace, you're just trying to sell your microwave because you're about to graduate from college and you want to leave, and you want to just sell that microwave for like $20, whatever, and go out to eat with your friends. You might not think much of it. Someone will message you. Wallahi, someone messaged me and told me about how they almost got caught up through someone messaging them on Facebook Marketplace to buy a book from them. I mean, this got to be the boringest item to possibly get hooked up with another person over, and they almost got caught up with that as well. Total stranger, completely like, I want to buy the book. Is it available? Yes, it's available. Then what happens? He clicks on her profile, she clicks on his profile, then there's something, and then the messages go in a totally different direction. So obviously I'm not saying all of a sudden everything's haram in the world, but I'm just saying, like, be aware of that and be considerate that the conversation could very well, doesn't matter where, can go out of line. All right? So that was point number 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. That was 4. Point number 5 is with the isolation. Now, this is a very interesting thing here as well. Okay? And I'm considerate of the time as well. So isolation is of 2 types. Okay? One type of isolation is that when you're in an emotional state, you are isolated yourself. You feel like you have no friends. You feel like you're alone. You feel like you have no one you can rely on. You feel like you have no community support. You feel like you can't turn to anyone. At that time, your thoughts, your emotions, shaitan will come to you and perhaps deceive you, saying, well, if you went to that place, you might not feel that way. If you talked to that guy, or if you spoke to that woman, or if you called this person you were interested in, or if you communicated, or if you went there, maybe you don't feel comfortable going to that bonfire at the beach at 11 o'clock at night. But you know what? I'm feeling really depressed, and I've just not been feeling really good, and I want to get out of this mood, so I'm just going to go there anyway. Despite the fact that that's not something you would normally do, what's going to happen is that isolation, that emotional state that you're in, can very well throw you in a position or put you in a very vulnerable position in your life where you may make decisions you regret. You may make decisions that you're actually not very happy with, but you did it because you were not in the right state of mind. Why I'm saying this right now to everyone is because maybe we've been there before, but we never realized what had happened to us. Maybe we were in that very vulnerable state in our lives at one point. Maybe we did something stupid we regretted. But no one ever told us that's why. No one ever said that the reason why this happened was because you were vulnerable emotionally, so you made very compromised decisions, and therefore, as a result, you unknowingly or maybe subconsciously threw yourself in a position to be vulnerable with some total strangers who took advantage of you. This is one possible situation that can come up, by being vulnerable with the opposite gender. Another way of looking at isolation is that if you're talking to someone, maybe let's say you're interested in them for the purposes of marriage, maybe the conversation's more serious and you're just kind of talking, and they isolate you. And they start to cut off your friends from you. No, you don't need it. You talk to them too much already. Hang out with me. They start cutting out your family. Oh, you talk to your mom? You call your mom every single day. You don't have to call her today. So slowly, you start getting cut off from your family, your mom. From, your close circle. You start getting more and more isolated. You start to get more and more cut off. So now you become isolated. What ends up happening in that situation, oftentimes, is that person then takes advantage of you. Whether it be for sexual purposes, financial purposes, they take advantage of your resources, right? And they've cut you off. And interestingly, what ends up happening when a person gets cut off like that, they become in this psychological state where they kind of just become neutral. They become okay with it. They get comfortable with their abuser and this person who puts them in a state of isolation. And as a matter of fact, as weird as that sounds, this thing is also very common. Where people will isolate you so that you don't come to know of their toxic behavior. You don't come to realize how evil or how bad of a person that person actually is. So they cut you off from people who might be able to point that out to you. And this same thing happened. Someone reached out to me for marriage purposes, and they said, what do you know about so-and-so? And I told them what I knew, and it was actually very problematic. And then when they addressed that, this person vanished, disappeared for 8 months. I hadn't heard back from them for 8 months. After 8 months, I finally hear from them and they tell me this crazy story of how basically after I told them that the person they were interested in marriage had all these very dangerous qualities, instead of taking what I said and, applying it in their life and sort of just getting out of the situation, they go up to that person and they say, oh, well, Jabir actually said that you have X, Y, and Z problems and that I should be away from you. So obviously that, as you can imagine, that didn't help the situation much, and it caused a lot of concerns or issues. But the point is, ultimately, that can also happen as a result of isolation, where one person isolates you. And it doesn't always have to be the opposite gender, but it happens the most in that regard, in that categorization. But it can also happen with family members, with roommates. It can happen with, someone who's of an authority, so like scholars. And this is another issue, unfortunately. We think that the predatory behaviors and bad cross-gender relations only happen with people outside of the masjid or the places of worship. The reality is that these things also can happen in the masjids. Never make yourself vulnerable to anybody, right? I don't know most of you, but let's say someone you feel comfortable with. You speak to them, you've built a really great relationship with them, you're very comfortable with them. So then you get too comfortable with them. Oh, no, that's my imam, he knows my whole family. That's still not really the best way of looking at it. Always maintaining these things because the Sharia says so. There's no exception to scholars. There's no exception to religious people who can give a nice talk. This can happen anywhere and everywhere, so therefore we need to be aware of this anywhere and everywhere. For our own sake. For their sake. For our own sake. So this point was in relation to isolation. Okay? The two types of isolation. The sixth point is with regards to if during this entire presentation you may have thought to yourself a couple of times, like, actually, I don't know where I stand right now. I feel like I'm kind of right on the verge of a lot of these things, but not fully in one or in the other. I feel like I've done it a couple of times where like maybe my communications was not so good. Maybe I was doing certain events with the opposite gender, etc. And I thought it was all done in a good way, but I'm kind of now doubting myself a little bit. So point number 6 is, if in doubt, reach out. Don't ever allow these things to just kind of like fester, to just be like sitting, I don't know, yeah, the other day we actually went on a group bonfire thing at the lake and at the beach. And I don't know, I thought it was a great little get together, but apparently this guy says not to do that anymore. So maybe, ask about that. Why is that odd? Now, here's the thing. I'm not trying to come here like ruin anybody's day and like, you live here. I would be at the beach every day if I could. San Francisco is really not that great. It's cold all the time. And, you see things at the beach you wish you'd never seen. So you have those horrors as well. But the thing is, I'm only sharing this as sort of like a toolkit. That you take that, you utilize it where you can, when you need to. But here's the thing. I've been to these bonfires, these community events, things at the beach, but there was a ton of people there. And there was ample separation. And the conversation was never odd or weird, or conversations never teeter-tottered between gender relations. It was like there was a group. They were doing their own thing. There was a scholar with us. The men were on their side. They had their food. We had our food. Everyone was doing their own thing, but we were just at the beach. This is very different. This is very different than a bunch of 21-year-olds totally alone at 2 o'clock in the morning at a beach somewhere. I mean, I'm sure you understand what I'm trying to say. I don't sound like, a crazy person. So anyways, the idea is that if ever you're in doubt about any of these topics or isolation, or maybe that's happening to you, maybe you were talking to a woman who you were interested in for marriage and, she's cutting you off from all of your family and saying they're all bad people, they're all toxic, just you and me forever. Maybe you want to think about that for a second. Maybe you want to double check that. Run that again. Talk to someone, talk to an elder, talk to the imam, talk to a therapist. Just get a second opinion. Why? Because what happens if you get a second opinion? Nothing. It fortifies what you are doing. It corroborates your point. You're good to go. However, if they then identify, hey, you know what? Actually, that's a little concerning. They took your bank account information. They have control of your credit cards. They're telling you how much you can use of your own money. Maybe we should explore that. That doesn't sound pretty normal to me, So these are sort of some of the things that, I would ask about. Or even in general, when you have communications, you can say that, for example, I'm in a group chat with, 10 other people. And in this group chat, all we do is we send jokes to one another. There's guys, there's girls. Is that okay? Then you ask that question and then, you get some clarity on that. And in case anyone's wondering what the answer to that question was that I answered, in my humble opinion, I think that that's also kind of that teeter-tottering on the verge of like conversation going south. Why? Because there's a bunch of men and a bunch of women, young adults, in a group chat, all trying to make each other laugh. Naturally, eventually, someone's going to find inclination towards the other person, and that could either go in a very positive way or in a very negative way. But why put yourself in that position in the first place? And so last, with that being said, is the discussion on marriage. So what if I want to speak to the opposite gender because I'm interested in marrying that person? I like them. This is also a very good discussion to have because as young adult Muslims, we need to know how to talk to the opposite gender for the purposes of getting married. Okay? Not just messing around. We talked about that. Not just for the sake of being, looking cool and sounding funny. We talked about that. Okay? So here's the thing. Now, when a person is going to talk to the opposite gender about, for the purposes of marriage, there's a couple of things to keep in mind. First and foremost, the degree of maturity that you have when you're ready to have this conversation is going to be very different than all these other things that I just mentioned throughout the course of this sort of presentation. You're not going to be, as jokey and laughing and flirty as you are when you're trying to be a lot more serious, or at least that's how you should not be. You should be more serious. You should be more sort of goal-oriented. You should have topics in mind that you would like to address with that person. how you want to talk to them. So now you might be thinking, well, then how do I actually talk to them then? So it's understandable. Maybe in your household, maybe you're a convert and you don't actually have a family that's going to understand these things, right? So then if you were to meet with that person, the opposite gender, in a public space that's well lit, maybe you bring one or two of your friends that sit one or two tables down, just, not that they're listening on everything that's happening, but just, to know that they're there. In that instance, that's totally fine. But again, the idea is it's number one, with the intention of marriage. Number two, your conversation is cordial but direct. Number three, you have very specific topics you're trying to address. You're not just there to talk about how your day was and then, people call it, is that Islamic dating? No, it's not. If you're going to get married in, in 8 weeks, then I don't think that's called dating, Now, I'm not suggesting you get married in 8 weeks, but what I'm saying is that if you have a list of things that you need to address, you're going to be a lot more serious about that, to get to know that person, to see do our goals align, do we have the same mindset for all these things, for religion, for children, for finance, for future goals, career goals, all these sort of things. So that's one way of meeting with the person, to communicate with them your needs or your wants or your concerns for the purposes of marriage. But what if, you can't meet with them at a coffee shop or something like that, because that's not, that's maybe you have family, etc. Now, the traditional route is that you approach their families. You tell your family will approach their family, communicate that my son or my daughter is interested in marriage, and, we'd like to facilitate this. So then, as a matter of fact, 2 weeks ago, on a Tuesday, a student called me while I was at UC Berkeley, and they told me that they said that this exact thing is coming up, that there was a woman that he was interested in. His computer turned off. That there was a woman that he was interested in, and he wanted to know what would be the best way for him to communicate with her. So he asked me what was the best way for him to communicate. So I said, one way that you can go about it is, if your family's involved, if you can speak to your families to facilitate, you go to their house or they go to your house. And you can be in the living room. Your parents can be in the outside or upstairs or whatever. But that you're in the living room and that you're communicating. Why? There's nothing wrong with that. Look, culturally, I can automatically sense, like people are getting tingly and uncomfortable. Like, oh my God, how did he just say that? What is he talking about? But here's the thing you have to understand. How else is two people supposed to get to know one another? Two young people are supposed to get to know one another to meet for the purposes of marriage, right? If you don't get a chance to talk to that person, and I do a premarital workshop where one of the slides is, instead of arranged marriages, we try to do what? We try to help facilitate. We help arrange a discussion or a conversation so that the two individuals can have an opportunity to get to know one another. To help arrange healthy marriages, not to arrange the marriages for them, but to help facilitate an open dialogue in a safe environment where that things are not going to go out of control. So when it comes to the purposes of marriage, one of the things that we can do for this, specific conversation or for this specific piece is to facilitate a space for you to communicate with that other person. This is safer. This is always better than just kind of leaving you out to your own, just to kind of let it go and see what happens, right? And then the last thing I'll mention is that, of course, there's a lot more that can be said when talking about this. But remembering everything that we said sort of in this whole presentation, using it together, right? When it comes to the purposes of marriage, even then, sending private DMs can be considered dangerous. Even then, flirting or being very sort of, creating a lot of small talk and chit-chat can be very dangerous. Why? Because now in your mind, you might be thinking, well, this is for the purpose of marriage, therefore it's okay. Whereas that just might be another avenue for a person to get caught up. So it's extremely important to be extra cautious, even more so when it's the intention with the intention of marriage. So that being said, I just kind of wanted to wrap up with this last point, and then we'll do the Q&As, inshallah, once the computer is up, or maybe if anyone has any questions, we'll ask directly. But when it comes to this last piece on marriage and the talk and the discussion of marriage, oftentimes people say, that there's this like stereotype that Muslims in college, when you're involved in a lot of Muslim organizations, etc., it's just like a breeding grounds for people to get to know one another to get married. But here's the thing. I'm not advocating to creating like all these like like marriage events and like get to know one another, speed dating kind of stuff. I'm not all for that. But here's the thing: if you know that there is a group of Muslims in a safe environment on a college campus who are sincerely interested, to for the purposes of marriage, to guard themselves so that they can be comfortable with the person that they marry, then yes, if you take all those necessary steps and then you pursue marriage while you're still at school, or while you met someone you might see someone in college that you like, or someone that you met with or that you ran into that you have interest for them. But by taking these necessary precautions, there would be nothing wrong with that, just having been the means for which you get to know them further for the purposes of marriage. Because it happened on campus, or it happened at an event, or it happened at a place where Muslims congregate, something like this even, right? So I don't want this, because there's this notion in the back of our minds that, oh no, a lot of these spaces are only for matrimonial services. No, it's not. But if it were to happen here, or at least start from here, that there's nothing inherently wrong with that. So, but inshallah, with that being said, I think we have spoken quite a bit, and I'm sure there's some questions, comments, clarifications that probably might come up. So we'll go ahead and allocate some time for that before Salat al-Isha, inshallah. Okay, this one, and this one.
Let's do this one. And then some are repeated.